Today on Sports Central, I'll be going over 5 reasons why the Clemson Tigers are going to once again win the college football playoff and bring another national championship to Clemson. We'll be going over 5 reasons here, and they will be in no particular order. With that being said, let's look at your number 1, and you got to have Trevor Lawrence on this list. He comes in at number 1, and of course, he's been a star quarterback for Clemson the last couple of seasons. He's projected to be the first overall draft pick in 2021. He's also 25-1 as a starting quarterback for Clemson, and if he does win the national championship once again in 2020, there's a good possibility that he's going to have a 40-1 starting quarterback record, and that's got to be like one of the best records that any quarterback's ever had at a team. He's been in 2 national championship games, once last season, once in 2018, and he's won one of them. He won the 2018 one over Alabama, and he handles pressure extremely well. I mean, if that's not enough evidence for you, I mean, you typically see out of most quarterbacks, most good quarterbacks, they have a really good freshman season, and then they go into their sophomore season, and they have a bit of a slump. It just isn't as good as their first season, and of course for Trevor Lawrence, that really was not the case for him at all. He put up over 3,600 yards last season with 36 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, and his completion percentage was 65.8%. So certainly last season, there was not much of a slump for him at all. I mean, being able to make it to the national championship in itself certainly is something that, all quarterbacks want to achieve, but very few are able to. He does lose his top receiver in T. Higgins going into 2020, so that's going to be probably his biggest hit. But for Trevor Lawrence, he still has a ton of potential heading into 2020. I expect him after this season to be known as one of the best quarterbacks that college football has ever seen. Moving on to number 2, we got your easier schedule next season for Clemson. They had a tougher 2019 schedule. Of course, they had to play multiple tough teams. They had to play Texas A&M. And at the time, let me remind you, Texas A&M was one of the best teams in the nation in week number 2 when they played them. They got the win there 24-10. But that certainly looked like a game that could have been Trevor Lawrence's first loss. They also had a road game at North Carolina, and of course North Carolina actually gave Clemson, I think, their closest game of the entire regular season. That almost was a major upset there for North Carolina. They also had to play Louisville on the road, Louisville being a rising team. That was a bit of a tougher game. And then you had to play South Carolina to finish off the season. And of course, South Carolina was not much of a team last season, but they also had to play Virginia in the ACC championship game, and as you know, that wasn't much of a problem for Clemson at all. They absolutely destroyed them 62-17. They moved on to the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl, where they would beat the Ohio State Buckeyes, and we all know how good Ohio State was last season, so that was a major win there, 29-23. Then of course, you move on to your LSU National Championship game, where they ended up losing it because of how good of a team LSU was. So certainly going into 2020, it does look to be a bit of an easier schedule. You do have a tough matchup at Notre Dame in November. That's going to be probably your toughest, I'd have to say, regular season game next season. But you also got a couple of games that are going to be tougher, including Louisville and South Carolina. I expect both those teams to be very improved in the 2020 season. And the good thing is that you got both of those games at home. That's going to be really good. And then you could also consider, Wake Forest being a team that could be good next season. They're facing a ton of losses. But you do have them on the road. But nonetheless, for Clemson, it's not all that tough of a schedule at all outside of Notre Dame and those 2 home games against Louisville and South Carolina. Moving on to number 3, we got the receiving core for Clemson, and of course they do lose their top wide receiver in T. Higgins. He was a major player for this team last season. He could be a late first-round draft pick into the second round for this NFL draft. So once again, he was a major player for this team last season. They do return the next 3 receiving leaders, though. Both Ross and Rogers were huge impacts on this offense. And as you can see below, Justin Ross put up over 800 yards of offense with 8 touchdowns and a 13-yard average per play. And then Amari Rogers also had a great season. He had right around 500 yards of offense with 5 touchdowns and a 14.9-yard average. So it'll be huge for Lawrence to have back a couple of big-time weapons. And certainly, Travis Etienne's also back. He's their running back, and we'll get to him in a sec. But he also had 432 receiving yards as well as 4 touchdowns. So he actually qualifies as their 4th best receiver on this team last season. He also had an 11-yard average, which is actually incredible for a running back, no doubt on that. And moving on to your number 4, we got the defensive line for Clemson. And the only loss on this defensive line is Niles Pickney. And of course, they're ranked by many as a top 3 defensive line heading into 2019. Of course, as you saw, they did have a few low points last season on the defensive line. Of course, they were a little bit inconsistent, but I expect them going into 2020 to be even better. Looking at how they only lose 1 defensive lineman, and he wasn't even a starter. Niles was not even a starter. So, this defensive line has a ton of potential going into 2020. They got a great recruiting class coming in as well. That's going to give the line a ton more depth as well. So, and three notable names for that would be Brian Brees. You also see Demonte Kephart and also Miles Murphy. Those three guys are going to be three significant names heading into the next few seasons. Of course, they're just coming in as true freshmen. So, yeah, and you could also see those three names possibly being starters going into 2020 as well. So, yeah, certainly this defensive line should be one of the best ones in the nation heading into 2020. Moving on to number 5, it's going to be Travis Etienne. No doubt on this one. I mean, he's going to return for his senior season. That is going to be huge. He looks to be one of the best running backs in the nation. No doubt on that either. I mean, he had over 2,000 yards of offense last season with 23 touchdowns and an 8.4 yard average. So, yeah, and he actually had 1,600 rush yards total. If you add in those receiving yards that he had, that puts you right over 2,000 total yards of offense last season. He's actually led Clemson in rushing all 3 seasons he's been there, something that's very rare, something that certainly is a great achievement to have. And he's also been named ACC Player of the Year for both 2018 and 2019. Another very impressive achievement by Travis Etienne. And yeah, he could have easily gone to the NFL draft. I mean, no doubt that he'd be an early rounder going into this NFL draft. But yeah, he decided to return for his senior season, so that's good for him. And yeah, certainly I expect him to put up the same amount of yardage as he did last season, maybe even more. I mean, yeah, Travis Etienne has a ton of potential. I think he's got a really bright future ahead, especially going in to the NFL. But yeah, that about wraps up your 5 reasons why Clemson will have a chance to win the national championship in 2020. And yep, this is just a new series we're doing. This is actually the first video of this series. We're going to be doing this every other day, so be sure to stay tuned for your team. But yeah, thank you all for watching once again. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I will see you all later.